Chapter 3. Day after day for 2 months, with the old man as our instructor, we gave our whole attention to a set of tablets which dealt entirely with characters, symbols, and their position, plan, and meaning. One morning, early in March, we went to the room in the temple as usual and found the old gentleman lying on the couch as though asleep. One of our party walked over and placed a hand on his arm to arouse him, then started back and exclaimed, "He is not breathing. I believe he's dead." We gathered around the couch and were so absorbed in our own thoughts of death among these people that we did not hear anyone enter. We were aroused from our reverie by a voice saying, "Good morning." We turned toward the door, and there stood Emil. We had supposed that he was 1,000 miles away, and his sudden appearance had startled us. Before we had time to compose ourselves, he had walked over and was shaking hands all around. In a moment, Emil walked to the couch on which the old man was lying. Placing his hand upon the old man's head, he said, "Here we have a dear brother who has departed from this earth, but has not been able to finish his work among us. As one of your poets has said, he has wrapped his mantle about him and has lain down to pleasant dreams. In other words, you have pronounced him dead. Your first thought is to get an undertaker and a coffin to prepare a grave to hide the mortal part of him while it dissolves. Dear friends, kindly think for a moment, to whom did Jesus speak when he said, 'Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me'? He was not talking to the outer self, the me, the shell. He was recognizing and praising the inner self, the infinite one, the all-hearing, all-knowing, all-seeing, the great and mighty omnipresent God. Can you not see where the eyes of Jesus were turned as he stood at the tomb of Lazarus? Did he, like you, look into that tomb and see a dead and dissolving Lazarus? While your vision was upon the dead, he held his vision upon the living, the only begotten of God. His vision was fixed upon unchangeable, eternal, omnipresent life, and that life transcends all. Now, with our vision held steadfastly toward the ever-present reality of God, we can behold his finished work. Here is a dear brother who never relied wholly on God, but went on partially in his own strength until he has reached this stage and given up and made the mistake which so many are making today, the mistake you look upon as death. This dear soul has not been able to let go of all doubt and fear, and thus he has relied on his own strength, and has not been able to finish the work set before all. Should we leave him thus, his body will dissolve, and he will be again sent forth to finish his mortal task, which is all but complete. In fact, so nearly complete is it that we can help him to finish, and we feel this to be a great privilege. You asked if he can again be awakened to full consciousness. Yes, he can, and so can all others who have similarly passed. Though he has passed, as you look upon it, we, who have shared a part of his life with him, can help, and he will be able to understand quickly so that he may take his body with him. It is not necessary to leave the body to so-called death and dissolution, even after one has apparently made the great mistake. Here the speaker stopped, and for a moment appeared to be lost in deep meditation. In a very short time, 4 of our friends from the village walked into the room. They gathered close together for a few moments as though in deep thought. Then 2 of them reached out their hands and motioned to us to join them. We stepped up close, and 2 placed their arms around 2 of our party, and we in turn placed our arms around each other until the circle was complete. The circle extended around the couch that the form of the departed was lying upon. As we stood there for a moment without a word being spoken, the light in the room became brighter. We turned, and Jesus and Pilate were standing in the room together, a few steps away. They came forward and joined us. There was another deep silence. Then Jesus stepped forward to the couch and, raising both hands, said, "Dear ones, will you just step through the veil of death with me for a moment? It is not forbidden ground as you think. If you will just step through as we have done and view it from the other side, you will see that it is only what our thoughts have made it. There is life there, the same life that is here." He stood for a moment with outstretched hands. Dear friend and brother, you are with us, and we are with you, and we are all together with God. The sublime purity, peace, and harmony of God surrounds, embraces, and enriches all. This perfection now manifests so vividly to you, our dear one, that you may arise and be received unto your Father. Dear one, you see and know that it is not dust to dust and ashes to ashes, but it is life, pure life, life everlasting. Your body need not be left to mortal dissolution. You now perceive the glory of the kingdom from which you come forth. You may now arise and go to your Father, and the shout goes up, all hail, the newborn one, the risen Lord, the Christ among men. Dear reader, words are but a travesty when the mortal attempts to picture the beauty and purity of the light that filled that room, and as that form arose, the light seemed to penetrate every object so that nothing cast a shadow, not even the form of our friend or our own bodies. The walls seemed to expand and become transparent until we seemed to be looking into infinite space. The glory of that picture cannot be told. Then we knew that, instead of standing in the presence of death, we were standing in the presence of eternal life, life unspeakably grand, never diminishing but going on and on eternally. What could we mortals do but stand and stare? In the uplift of those few moments we were carried, for a time, far beyond our most sanguine imagination of heaven and the beauty of it all. It was not a dream, but real. Thus the real can be greater than any dream. We were privileged to see through and beyond the shadow. The beauty and tranquility of that scene and the great faith we have already placed in our friends carried us completely over the divide that day, and today that divide is but a level plain. Yet in some way it was made clear that each one for himself must first scale the heights before the beauty beyond can be seen. With every vestige of age gone, our friend, whom we looked upon as raised from the dead, turned toward his associates and, in a moment, began to speak. These are his words as he stood facing our friends. It is as though they were cast in raised gold upon a tablet which stands always before me. The voice came forth with a majesty that I cannot express. There was no affectation, just a clear, deep note of sincerity and strength. He said, "Dear ones, you cannot know the joy, the peace, the great bliss you have given me in awakening me as you have. Just a moment ago it was all dark. I stood fearing to go on, and yet I could not return. The only way that I can explain it is I seemed engulfed in a great blackness from which I suddenly seemed to awaken, and now I am again with you." Here his face became so radiant with joy that there was no mistaking his sincerity. Then he turned to us and said, "Dear ones, how I love to think of our association. You can never know the joy it has given me to have clasped your hands, the great joy it has given me to see and know and feel the sincerity with which you have accepted these, my dear helpers, who at this moment I am able to call divine. Could you see through my eyes at this moment, you would be able to know the bliss that I am experiencing. The greatest joy of all is to know so fully that each of you will stand and know just as I am standing and knowing. That joy you will know only when you stand as I stand. I can say that it is well to have lived a full life, to be able to enjoy one moment of this. Then to think that I can see all eternity unfolding. Do you wonder when I say that my eyes are almost blinded and I am dazed with the revelation? Do you wonder at my greatest longing to unfold this vision to you, and not only to you, but to every brother and sister in the whole wide universe of God? Dear brothers, if I could lay a transforming hand upon you and lift you to where I stand, it seems that my joy would be multiplied many-fold at this moment. I am shown I must not do that. I am shown that you, yourselves, must stretch forth this transforming hand, and when you have stretched it forth, you will find God's hands ready to grasp yours. you will be able to walk and talk with him, and God will eternally bless you as he does all. The greatest joy of all is I am shown that it does not matter what the caste or creed of church, all are welcome. In a moment, he had disappeared from our view, just faded away, it seemed to us. Was this an ethereal vision? All my associates concluded that it was not, for 2 of them had clasped this man's hand. I leave it to the reader to decide. Then one of our friends from the village turned to us and said, I know that you are doubting, but won't you understand that this was not staged for your benefit? This is but one of the emergencies in our lives, and when the emergency does arrive, we are able to come up over the emergency. This dear one had not been able in his own strength to quite surmount the divide, as you call it. In fact, as you see it, he had passed on. The soul had left the body behind, and one so enlightened can be helped at the crucial moment so that the soul returns and the body finishes its perfection. Then the body can be taken along. This brother longed too ardently to pass on, and he left his body when just a few more steps, as it were, helped it over the divide, and the perfection was complete. The help extended was our great privilege. We slowly withdrew our arms and stood for a full minute in absolute silence. One of our party broke the silence with the words, "My Lord and my God." As for me, it did not seem as though I should ever want to talk again. I wanted to think. We were all seated, and a few had found their voices and were conversing in low tones. This condition had lasted for 15 or 20 minutes, and nearly everyone was engaged in general conversation, when one of our party walked to the window. He turned and said there seemed to be strangers arriving in the village. We all went down to meet them, as it was a very rare occurrence for strangers to visit the village at this season of the year, and on foot, as it was just past midwinter. When we arrived, we found that it was a party from a smaller village about 30 miles down the valley. They had brought a man who had lost his way in the storm 3 days previous and had been nearly frozen. His friends had carried him on a stretcher all that distance through the snow. Jesus stepped close and, placing his hand upon the man's head, stood for a moment. Almost instantly the man threw off the wrappings and rose to his feet. His friends, when they saw him stand, stared at him for an instant, then ran from the scene in terror. We could not persuade them to return. The man who was healed seemed dazed and uncertain. 2 of our friends persuaded him to go with them to their homes, while our party, accompanied by Jesus, returned to our quarters.